In this tutorial, we're going to look at how we can use different nodes to give ourselves some extra effects while we're working. One of those is to create a matte where we can mask off part of our image. The term that is used specifically for that type of node in Harmony is called a cutter. So in this little sample that I have here, we can see how the eye stays within the white of the eye and the mouth is staying, whereas the lower jaw, the artwork, disappears when it moves outside of the head shape. If I look at the upper or lower lid, we can see that the eyelid can move, but it's going to stay within the confines of the eye. Or if I grab the eye itself, we can see as we move it around, it stays within the matte area or the mask of the eye shape. So we're going to learn how to rig this and set this up to create a basic eye for animating purposes so that you don't have to do all of your eye animation through drawing substitution. So taking a look at how our creature is constructed, we can see I have an upper eyelid, a lower eyelid, and then I have the pupil, the iris, the white of the eye. Put some extra lines around it just to give it some kind of depth. We have an upper lip and a lower lip. So when I move the lower lip, we don't want it to extend beyond the shape of the head. I mean, I could if I built a whole lower lip and chin into it so it would move and blend. And that would be a possible way I could animate my creature. But that's not what we want to do in this instance. So the trick that we're aiming for here is to use the node element that is called a cutter. And the cutter allows you to create a mask or a matte to do it. So it's a node that has two inputs, one for the artwork, one for what will be your cutter object. So we're going to rig this whole character up. Oh, wrong full screen. Want to full screen the node view so we have a little bit more room to work. So right now our character is set up. We have a master peg on it, and then I have the whole mouth, the whole eye, and then it's broken down where we have the highlight or the glint on the eye, so we can see that sits on top of it, but that goes beneath the lid. So when we look at the connection pipes here into our composite, now here's the white of the eye. Let's move this over so it's not directly in. Yeah, well, actually we'll move the pupil and the iris over. So we'll move the pupil over, move the iris over. I'm just using the iris because the iris doesn't ever really change shape. In most standardized, the pupil may get bigger or smaller, so it should have its own peg, so if we want to animate that. But if I just grab this would be the pupil iris kind of group peg as well. I can get away with not needing a second one. So these are our core elements that we're working with. The item that we are going to add into this is going to be a cutter. And if I go under favorites, I'll find it there. It's also on some of the other lists, but favorites is where So under combine, we can see there's cutter as well, but I know it's always under favorites because it's one of those common ones. Transparency and cutter are two of the more common ones that we use, so I will add a cutter in. So for this, I'm going to need quite a few cutters to finish out what we are working with here. I'm going to need a cutter for the upper lid. I'm going to need a cutter for the lower lid. I'm going to need a cutter for the pupil, for the iris, and I will need cutters for the upper and lower lips. So I'm going to just set this over here. I'm going to copy, paste, 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 paste. We'll just do one more. We'll just leave that one so I don't have to go find it later. So we'll need a cutter for the iris. I'm going to need a cutter for the pupil. I'm going to need a cutter for the upper lid. I'll need one for the lower lid, and for the upper lip, and for the lower lip. So there we have all the cutters that we're going to be using. Now when we take a look at the cutter, if we zoom in, we will see that it has this little mask icon. So it looks like a party mask on there. And the way that this works is we insert the cutter just into the connection pipe for the item that it's working with. So in this case, if you hold down Alt or Option and drag over, it inserts it into that connection pipe. So now we have that inserted. And now we have an additional input port that's going to allow us to input what will be the mat or mask for it. So we'll come back to the lips in a little bit because the eye is a little bit easier to get with right now. So we'll do the lower lid, upper lid. Now I'm just going to move this over so it's not, we don't have the connection going through it right there. And pull the pupil up here and pull in a cutter there, pull in a cutter here. Okay. So now we have our different cutters waiting for a mat to happen. Well, what we want for both the iris and the pupils is we want and for the upper and lower lid is we want that mat to be the white of the eye. So I'm just going to pull this down here, and I'll pull this down here because if we look, where is the white of the eye? It's down here. So instead of dragging back up, it's easier to drag it down. So the way that we connect it, so this is the pupil. We'll just start with the pupil and see how this works. I'm going to drag this over into the pupil. Now the white of the eye didn't change. Everything else is there. So now if we get out of full screen, let's just move this. We can move this and we'll go, uh-oh, where did it go? Now it looks like we have a mat going on here, and that's simply because the upper lip artwork is on top, so the lip is on top of the eye, and that's why we see that happening. I'll just set this off to the side here. So we may be wondering what happened to our pupil. Now, if I click on the yellow box, which gives me the options for this cutter, what it's doing is the pupil, if I can select it, we'll just close this here and just zoom that out a little bit. Go into the pupil, and there it is. And now if I move, oh wait. So I'm using the white of the eye as a mat, yet now it's not lining up there because our mat is the white of the eye. So let's go back into that cutter, and remember we just saw an option for inverted. Now I click inverted, and now we can see how it sits, and it exists inside the eye. Now, if we zoom in, we're going to find we still have some cleanup work to do, but that is certainly going to... Now we can see by not having the cutter working with a mat yet for the iris, we get some really interesting stuff happening. So I probably, before I duplicated all of those cutters, should have inverted them, so then when I copy pasted it, I wouldn't have to individually go back and change each one. That was unfortunate on my part. So this cutter here belongs to the iris. We can see it's highlighting the pipe to the iris there. And we just want to drag the white of the eye over to be the mat. And once again, click on the yellow box to pull up the name and options. Click the button. There we go. So now if I grab the eye and move this around, we can see how it sits mostly inside the white of the eye. Now these extra lines of artwork I added are adding a little bit of confusion as to what's going on. So let me go find those. We need a little more room here to work. And it's the eye corners. That's what I want. I'll just disable that. So if we have a node selected and hit the disable, we see keyboard shortcut D, keyboard shortcut A to enable. So disable or enable, A and D are what we want. If we go back over here and move the eye over, so now when I move the eye, we can see we do have, as it moves to the edge, a little bit of difficulty that doesn't look quite right because we lose the line. But there is a fix for that. And that's what we're going to look at now, is how to fix that so that it does not do that. And what we are going to be able to take advantage of is when we have the white of the eye, we have line art and we have color art for that layer. So we can see I have the line art. Oh, I'm on the corners. The white of the eye line art or color art. So we have the two separate parts. And what we need to have happen is we just want the line art to sit on top of the iris and the pupil. And that's easy enough to do. And this is also one of the reasons why we always want to try and draw with our line art on the line art layer or color on the color art layer, because when we do that, it's going to afford us more options when we start working with our nodes. So if I look, and let's find, so if I click on the iris and follow the iris down, click on its cutter and follow it down, we can see in the composite it sits right here. The next item in the composite is the white of the eye, so it sits beneath it, which is what we want. But we want its line art to sit on top. And we can do that by using the line art node. So now, if I go into my node library and I just type in line, we'll see we have line art. And I can just drag a copy of that out to be able to use that. And we'll just extend this up so we have a little more room to work with, and that will help. All right, so now I have line art for the white of the eye, and I'll drag over to that. So then we just have to figure out, so here is the node for the pupil going through its cutter. So if I click on that, right there. So we want a copy of the line art for the eye, And let's just move this over so we can see the magic happen as we do it. So now, if I want this line art, let's go find that again. So here is the pupil. It's right at this large gap. And I'm just going to drag the line art so it sits in between. When I do that, we can see how the line art now, a second kind of representation or copy of the line art is now being displayed in my composite that is on top of the pupil and the iris. So we can see how those move nicely within that. Now, if this line art were down, oh, it looks like we went a little bit too far. We didn't need to be on top of the highlight, but now if I go here and zoom in, we'll see it's on top of the iris, but it's beneath the pupil because here is the cutter for the pupil right here. So if we just pull it over one, now it sits on top. So that's an easy fix that we can employ to get the line art on top. Now, if we go into our eyelids here, so if I click on this eyelid and move it, we want to use the wide of the eye as a cutter for that. Well, remember first off, we do need to invert the cutter. So we remember that. And now the white of the eye is going to be the matte for that. And once again, we can see, hey, we're kind of having a problem with the eyelids unless we like the fact that the eye disappears, which, you know, I kind of like that, even though that wasn't in my original artwork. In demo, I'm not opposed to how that's looking. I'm kind of liking that. So let's drag this over for that. Oh, wait. Before we do that, let's get the eye in place so we'll be able to find it. So we don't have an additional handle or means of grabbing those lids. So this is a kind of, all right. This wasn't how I had it set up, but kind of liking how this looks when you open the eye. Like that. Okay, that's not bad. Now, if I wanted the line art to sit on top, I just need to pull this over. So if we pull it over a few more times like that, so now the line art sits on top and the lids are moving within the shape of the eye. Oh, but I forgot we had turned off. Make that active again. So once we have that active, we do kind of want the line art to be on top. So now I can just grab that lid, pull it down, grab this lid, pull it up so we can close the eye, or go for partially open eye, click on the iris and move it. So now we can see that the eye is prepped and ready to animate. Now the same process is going to happen when we work with the mouth. I'll just go and invert the cutters right now so it's done. Wouldn't be a bad name to rename each cutter to match up what it's associated with. Now the mat for the cutters really should be, and we can see, you know, it's not a problem. We don't really need to worry about the eye because I don't see needing to move this up any higher. Though we could put all of the eye layers on top because maybe I don't want it kind of pinching right in there. And I might be able to shave off a little bit of that red. Either way. We'll see. So we have, because realistically it should be sitting lower about here, but now when I pull this down it extends down, so we need to fix that. So that is the lower lip. So the lower lip we need to attach into its cutter. So let's go full screen this so I can go find what I need, which is the body is going to be the mat for it. So I'll just drag a copy all the way over. And now I have to make sure I drag it into the mat port. We don't want it to go into the primary part because then that would mean this is a cutter for that layer. And when we do that, and notice when we're connecting a mat and it uses a dashed line, not a solid line, so it gives you that as a view. Now, let's go back out and we can see we're running into the same issue we had with the eye, which is we lose the line to that layer. So see how we're losing that line to the layer. So we need to add another line art in. So I need another line art. Just drag it out, connect it to the body, and I can just drag this one down. It'll be easier. We'll just pop over into our full screen. It makes sense to leave it inside this backdrop, and because these are the mouth layers there, we know that then this line art will just simply want to be all the way at the far left. Exit back out. Looks like we're cooking fire now because it is working. We can move this around. We can move the upper. Now we could put a cutter on the upper one if we needed to. We could use, make the eye the cutter. If we ever knew we were going to be, stretching the mouth out beyond the body, then we could do that, because when we look at, if I move them both, we can see how that works. And there are some times where we may want to do that because we will animate the features across the face and we'll need that to use the mat to disappear. So knowing that, we'll just go ahead and drag another version of the body over onto it so that we now have the body being a mat twice for the lips. So now if we were to select the entire mouth, move it over, looks like we need a cutter for the mouth because the lips are disappearing. So we could use, well, we got one more cutter here, we might as well, since we have it, go ahead and use it. Let's try again. Probably we just have the body over here. That might make more sense, simply because that is what we are dragging in. Since the body is working with that, the body's not the cutter. Now we could have, so we have the cutters for these, and it's possible that we could attach all of these into a group with its own composites and then create the body as a cutter, so we could even animate the eye across the face as well. I don't know if this particular character, that's something I want to do with it, but we could, and once again, I should have done that in the first place, but I didn't. So now the mouth as a unit moves around nicely. The lines stay where we need them to be. So we're in good shape. So key things when we're working with the cutter, one is that we typically will invert it. And the left port with the little mask icon is where you put what you want to be your mat or mask for it. And otherwise you insert the cutter into the pipe for the artwork that you want to apply the mask to. That's really all there is to working with it, but this is a great way to simplify your animation to give you more flexibility without needing to create hundreds and hundreds of drawing substitutions to cycle through. Good luck.